All right, I think we're ready. Go ahead, Marco.
Okay, I think your screen, I just went out. There we go. Now it's in presentation mode. All right, well, hello everyone and welcome to our second webinar we've done like this. It's another virtual one. As you guys know, we typically like doing these in person, but given the current situation, we find that the virtual platforms at least allow us to get some good content and relevant content out to condo managers, board members. For now, obviously, once we're able to continue these in person, we're gonna ideally strive to do a mix of both because the in-person ones are really valuable as well. As you guys enter the room, just so you're aware, all of the mics and cameras of the attendees are turned off automatically, and we're also recording the session, and we're gonna make the video available to everyone once the webinar is complete. So today we're lucky enough to have a really enthusiastic and well-versed panel that collaboratively have a wealth of knowledge on the ins and outs of the condo world. By this point, you'd think that everyone is kind of tired of hearing the word COVID over and over. But since it's such a dynamic situation with ever-changing perspectives and parameters, it seems that there's always a topic to discuss with regards to the situation. So as you guys registered, you know that today's topic is amenities are opening, now what? Everyone who lives in a condo understands that amenities are high traffic areas, also really good areas to use if you live there. COVID provided us with a situation where most condos had to close them in terms of safety. So now as they start to reopen, a ton of questions come about as where we stand. Before we get into it, I'm gonna introduce our company, the hosts, Minute Solutions. I'm Marco Linde, VP of Sales and Marketing, and my partner is Noah Maislin, CEO. He's gonna be handling the question and answers at the end of the webinar. And you guys can also direct questions to Noah during the presentation, and you'll see that at a box toward the bottom of your screen. For those of you who haven't worked with Minute Solutions, we see a lot of familiar names coming in here, some new as well. We're a minute-taking company that was founded in 2014 by Noah and myself, providing meeting minutes for over 1,000 condos in the GTA, as well as a variety of different industries all over North America and the world. Another housekeeping point before we proceed, a lot of talk has come up recently about virtual AGMs. We're currently working on a virtual AGM platform in collaboration with GetQuorum. That's going to allow us to host and moderate owners meetings for clients, which we're all very aware is in super high demand. So send Noah and I an email just to find out more, including timelines. We're hoping to launch soon, and we're going to have some updates on that as we approach the first week of September. In terms of a hard start line, we don't have that yet, but like I said, reach out to Noah or myself if that's something that you guys are interested in, and we can definitely provide you guys with some more information. All right, Noah, if you just want to pull up the agenda here, we can go through the items that we're going to discuss today. So now for the good stuff. The panelist introductions, we have Caroline Graham, Luis, and Fred Rosen. Very enthusiastic and people that are actually a lot of fun to work with, but at the same time, as I mentioned, super well versed in the industry. So they're gonna have a lot of good information for you guys throughout their presentations, which will follow the introductions, and then we're gonna close it out with the Q&A. We're aiming to complete this by 5 p.m. today. It might go a bit over depending on how long the Q&A runs, but feel free to leave whenever the presentations are done. And just a reminder that throughout you can ask Noah questions within the question box toward the bottom of your screen. And finally, there's gonna be a brief survey after the webinar. It's gonna ask you guys a couple questions. It provides us really good feedback on how you guys found the webinar, as well as other useful topics that we can present to you guys if there's anything pressing that you guys want us to discuss and bring some experts along to discuss. So now a brief intro about our speakers. Let's start with Luis Hernandez, Associate Lawyer at Shibley Wrighton. I'm gonna make this as brief as possible, but they have a lot of good stuff here, so I don't wanna skip anything. As you guys already know, Luis is a condo lawyer with Shibley Wrighton. He joined the firm in 2018 after several years at a boutique condo law firm. He got his law degree from Windsor and his undergrad from Western. Luis's practice involves him in a lot of condominium law, and he advises board of directors, property managers, and unit owners on a lot of diverse matters related to condominium corporations across Ontario. Knowing that he had a passion for condominiums early on in his legal career, Luis became involved with the condominium community during law school and now sits on the board of directors of the Windsor Essex chapter of the Canadian Condominium Institute. Sorry, a bit of a tongue twister there. He also sits on CCI's National Council and on a number of other CCI Toronto committees. As a condo resident himself, Luis believes that education is vital, and he enjoys contributing to educational efforts by writing for condominium industry publications and presenting on condominium law. Next, we have Caroline Graham. As you guys know, Caroline is a fiery individual with lots of info and a great experience within the condo world. She's a lot of fun to work with, but also a wealth of knowledge. She's been in the property business since her last year of high school. A grade 12 co-op assignment at a local real estate company led her to obtaining her real estate license at the age of 18. Selling real estate, as you can imagine, is not a simple task for an 18-year-old, as buyers are not confident that someone so young truly understands their needs. However, Caroline continued to work in real estate offices, at first a receptionist and then as an office manager. In 1989, Caroline then joined the Kerbal Group, working there for the next 16 years as a rental agent, site administrator, and finally property manager. Caroline began taking her RCM classes and obtained her designation in 2003. 2 years later, in 2005, Caroline joined Dell Property Management, Inc., when she was presented with the opportunity to manage a large 2-condo site with a shared facilities. Caroline was promoted to the position of district manager in 2012 and currently oversees a large portfolio and supervises 40 or so staff members. And last, but definitely not least, Fred Rosen, Spectrum Building Services. Spectrum Building Services has serviced the building industry for close to 30 years. With Fred as founder and CEO, Spectrum is a leader in carbon neutrality operations and BioClean disinfection management program, adhering to Health Canada's combating COVID protocols. And now, without spoiling the rest of the presentations, I'm going to ask Luis to kick it off by talking about the legalities of common areas and condos during such a precarious time. Caroline's going to follow that up by shedding some light on the general sentiment of condo communities during the age of social distancing and sanitation. And Fred's going to bring it home by explaining what we can do in terms of sanitation to ensure a healthy and sterile community for everyone in the condo world. So without further ado, I welcome Luis to take the helm.
Hello, everybody. Just bear with me for half a second as I put on the presentation. But it's nice to see everyone, sort of. So you should be able to see my screen now. Can I get a thumbs up from someone just to make sure that you are seeing the first slide? Thank you, Fred. All right, so thank you for the introduction. As was mentioned, I'm a condominium lawyer with Shibley Wrighton, and I'm here to talk about sort of the law around the closing and reopening of amenities in condos. It is a very, very sensitive subject and one that is quite vast. So my presentation is going to be extremely high level, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can once we're done the presentation. I already saw a couple of them are coming in, but perhaps some of my comments will answer those questions to begin with. To start, I wanted to recap a little bit on the authority to close amenities first, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's trite at this point. We're talking about reopening them, but as most of you know, the federal and provincial governments, along with municipal governments, had many, many different directives in terms of how to deal with this COVID-19 pandemic, but among them was the closure of amenities. So certain amenities like pools and gyms were required to be closed because they're considered to be high traffic areas and could be higher risk areas for the transmission of COVID-19. In addition to that, condominium boards acted within their authority per the Condominium Act and generally based on their governing documents, other declarations, bylaws, and rules to make the tough decision to close amenities. And I'm sure at the time that invited a lot of questions from unit owners and residents about whether they had the authority to do so or whether or not they could get their common expenses back. And those are questions that have been answered on many different presentations before, but just wanted to recap that a little bit to bring us back to where we are today, you know, beginning of September, which is absolutely crazy, and to discuss what should be considered when we're reopening the amenities now. So I get a lot of questions similar to Dwight Schrutz here, which is, if my gym is open, my Good Life, why isn't my condo's gym open yet? Same with pools. Why are public pools outside open and my condo's isn't? And any variation of that question. And the answer is pretty simple. Condos are like a fourth form of government. What applies to the general community doesn't necessarily apply to a specific condominium. As you all know, boards of directors are the officials elected by the owners to make the difficult decisions for their community, the same way that we elect officials into all levels of government. And boards of directors have to be mindful about managing the common elements of the assets of their specific corporation. So you have to take the needs and wants of their community into consideration when making those decisions. So it's been a very difficult time for boards. They've had to make decisions that were likely unpopular with some, but were necessary in certain situations, such as closing the amenities. And the main basis on which they relied on was Section 117 of the Condominium Act. So I've put Section 117 up on the slide, but it essentially limits or prohibits dangerous activities or conditions from existing in a condominium. Now, the Condominium Act didn't exactly contemplate a global pandemic, but in a situation like this, 117 really overrides a lot of the other provisions that you might find in the Declaration or in the Condominium Act. And boards are empowered to really take action to limit activities that are likely to damage the property or cause injury to individuals. So when you're talking about certain amenities like party rooms, gyms, or pools that are very high traffic, require a lot of cleaning, and could be quite dangerous in the middle of a pandemic in terms of exposure or really any type of situation that's going to create gatherings of people and a lot of inability to physically distance from one another, the board had the authority to invoke Section 117 and limit the use of those common elements or the assets, at least on a temporary basis. I don't think this will be a permanent condition, but it is something that the boards were empowered to do. So what I was describing earlier, and as Keanu is illustrating here, it's like we're the same, but we're different. So every condo community is very similar. They're all governed under the Condominium Act. You know, it's shared living. There's a lot of the same concerns when it comes to condominiums, but ultimately, every community is different, whether it be the socioeconomic background, the ethnic background, even the age groups in different communities. So for example, where I live, my building is attached to a retirement home as well. So the risks associated in my building were much higher, and the residents needed to be mindful of the fact that we were next to a very vulnerable sector of the population. So some of those limitations and the closures happened very quickly in my community, versus other buildings might not have had the same issues or concerns. I can also tell you we've had clients that were buildings close by to hospitals, and they had a lot of medical professionals, nurses, and doctors that lived in their building. So there were definitely concerns about quarantining and exposure for these people to come home and their use of the amenities as well. So while condominiums are all governed under the same umbrella, ultimately the reason that they are a fourth form of government is because each community has a right to govern itself and really respond based on their different needs. Which leads us to what a lot of buildings are currently doing. So I constantly get asked about indemnity waivers or releases or any version of that language, basically getting someone to sign their life away and say, you're not going to sue the corporation if you contract COVID or if you get sick or die or anything of that sort. And I hate to be the person to say that they're useless, that they're absolutely not useless, but they are limited in value. Legal waivers has an entire body of law that is indefinite. Their value really is limited. It's not a silver bullet solution that if a person signs an indemnity waiver, all of a sudden all liability has disappeared and you never need to worry about it again. However, it does give the corporations an additional tool to sort of point at and say, you know, an individual used these amenities and they acknowledged the risk that was inherent in them. So many of the indemnity waivers that we've been drafting contain language along the lines of the corporation can't guarantee that you're not going to catch COVID. They're taking reasonable steps to avoid it. You know, there's increased cleaning, or, you know, certain areas have been closed and there are limitations in how it's being used. However, by signing this document, you are acknowledging that there is a risk, that you haven't traveled outside of Canada, that you haven't been exposed to COVID. So it does give the corporations an additional tool that they could point to or use if there was ever a worst case scenario where you had a person contract COVID on the property or die from COVID that they contracted on the property. So while it may not be appropriate for every circumstance, it is definitely something worth considering and discussing with your legal counsel in terms of its value and whether it's appropriate for your community. Now, one question that I get asked a lot is, can you force an individual to sign an indemnity waiver or a release prior to using an amenity? And the classic lawyer cop-out here is, it depends. It really depends, but keep in mind that unit owners are entitled to use the common elements and the amenities that they pay common expenses for. So while it is highly encouraged and, you know, pressure can be applied to get people to sign these releases, there's not necessarily a mechanism to force people into doing it. And it's something that each community and corporation should be discussing with their legal counsel in terms of the contents of the waivers or release, how broad or narrow they are, and to what extent they can impose requirements of signing them before being able to use certain amenities. There hasn't really been any case law on that topic yet. It hasn't really been a huge point of contention, but it may be. So it is something that's worth discussing. Now, with respect to masks, this has been one of the hottest button issues when it comes to reopening amenities. And there have been, as most of you probably know, certain municipalities or regions that have instituted mandatory indoor masking in indoor common elements. So depending on your region, the requirements may be different, but in the larger metropolitan areas in Ontario, Ottawa, Mississauga, Toronto, I believe London, but I'm not 100% sure, there are now requirements that you wear masks while on the indoor common elements. And again, the corporation can enforce this requirement based on their condominium documents, their corporation declaration, bylaws, and rules. But it is a contentious issue and one that a lot of different organizations are struggling with. So lots of condominiums are struggling with compliance, and you hear stories all the time about supermarkets or retail operations. There are a lot of opinions on the subject, and it is very debatable. So you have people that truly don't want to comply. So it'll be one of those things that will be interesting to see how it develops. I know I've definitely had to deal with a couple of those myself, but ultimately, depending on your region, they may be required. And if your municipality has required it, it makes your corporation's enforcement of that much easier. And then finally, I just want to talk about when you're reopening your amenities, ultimately, it's all about mitigation. You want to have the best risk mitigation strategy that you possibly can. So again, that looks different from community to community, but what I've described before are a couple of the tools that you can use. You can have indemnity waivers and releases. You can establish policies in terms of certain use of the amenities. So I've seen some buildings institute schedules, so only 3 people or 4 people can use the gym in 45-minute slots. But there's a lot that goes into these things. You know, increased cleaning schedules. I believe I saw a question pop up as to, is there a requirement as to who should be cleaning? You know, that again will be dependent on your community, but you know, the thought that the boards should have and property management should have is how do I best mitigate risk under the circumstances of COVID? And it's very difficult to tell. Each building has different amenities, different populations, and really it's something that you'll have to discuss with all the stakeholders. You'll have to talk to your communities, you'll have to talk to your management, you'll have to talk to your legal counsel, and really create a fulsome strategy to make sure that the corporation isn't exposed in a way that's going to be a problem. And with that, I think I'm going to pass over the floor to Carolyn, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions later on. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, folks. My apologies. My video is a little ahead of me. So thank you for joining us today. I'm just basically going to speak about some general guidelines around reopening, and then specifically maybe about your gym, your yoga studio, pools, spinning classes, that kind of thing. So from a general standpoint, you should have sanitizing stations at the entrance to each of your amenities. Ensure proper signage is installed where appropriate. I'm going to show you some pictures a little later on, but basically we've seen all of these decals in a number of places, you know, the little people with their, you know, stay 2 meters apart, stand here, that type of thing. Communicate, communicate, communicate. I can't stress this enough. It's not simply okay to put up a notice in March saying, you know, enforce physical distancing, make sure that you are standing 2 feet or 6 feet apart in an elevator. You're going to have to continually communicate with your residents and your stakeholders. That means multiple notices. This is one of these situations where we want to over-educate people. You know, sometimes people do get a little sick of notices, but in this situation, again, back to what Luis was saying about, you know, risk mitigation. If anyone ever challenged us, we want to be able to show them 100 pieces of paper that we put up rather than 1 back in March. You want to enforce your physical distancing procedures. And again, that can be signed, that can be taken care of by having proper signage up. And you want to make sure that the proper PPE is worn where necessary. So again, that means your face masks in all your common areas. And there are, you know, some at the School of Thought, you even want people wearing them in the gym while on a treadmill. The current bylaw actually states that when you're engaged in physical activity such as that, you do not have to wear a mask, although I have heard from some lawyers that their communities are considering still enforcing that while, you know, while engaging in that type of physical activity. We're going to get to the waivers. So consider having your residents sign waivers. Ensure you have a way to determine who's been using the amenities. That's going to be very important for contact tracing should, God forbid, someone tell you that they are positive and they used the gym yesterday. Okay, very important to know who used those amenities. So here's the type of thing I'm talking about. As you can see, this is one of our larger communities. There's notices posted on the gym door. There is a hand sanitizing station right beside it. And there is a very evident physical distancing decal in red right on the door, showing people what is expected of them when they use these amenities. This is the same gym. We've got sanitization stations in the gym itself. The bylaw, Luis was talking about who can clean the gym. The bylaw does not state who can clean it. It just says that these need to be sanitized in between use. So we would suggest that each user sanitizes before and after, and also that you schedule cleaning breaks during the day to allow the cleaners to thoroughly clean that space as well. This is one of those liability release waivers that we're talking about. Again, it just says what Luis was talking about. You're telling us that you haven't traveled out of the country, you don't have any signs of COVID. You acknowledge that you are using this at your own risk. And again, this is just one of those CYA things in this situation. As property managers, we all know that these generally aren't worth the paper they're written on. But given the current circumstances, I think it's best that if anything did happen, like Louise says, that someone acknowledges that they were using this at their own risk. So to get back to what I was saying about being able to contact trace, in some buildings you're going to have, in most of the newer buildings, you're going to have, you know, condo control or building link platforms, that type of thing, where you could have your amenities booked and you could trace that way. This comes from one of my older buildings where they don't have that set up. So what they've done is actually created logs that are going to be put at the entrance to every amenity. People are going to sign a date and confirm that they've disinfected before and after use, and sign in and sign out. So that, again, there is a way to contact trace. You'll all have been watching the news lately. All establishments are trying to do this. The brass rail did not do it particularly well because people gave a lot of a lot of false information. But we're not going to have that same problem, obviously, in our condominium community. Just another notice, again, in a waiver, this one goes so far as to say, you know, wear your mask, make sure you're washing your hands and sanitizing before use. Just another agreement, and an amenity use agreement form coupled with a waiver in this case. So in terms of how you do this practically, we consider breaking the space down into zones. This will ensure physical distancing. So I'm going to show you some pictures later. Again, depending on the size of your gym, you're going to have to determine how many people can use it, you know, safely at any given time. Schedule a break in bookings to allow cleaners to clean the room thoroughly. I'd also suggest, we've all seen in theater bathrooms, restaurant bathrooms, those schedules, and the cleaners actually sign off when they've been in the room. So I'd suggest posting those in the rooms as well, so that the cleaners can sign in and sign out when they've done that cleaning. Book each zone in 1 hour increments, again, either through an online platform or through your concierge. Keep the amenity doors locked and have the residents sign out the fobs for those amenities from the concierge. Suggest having the users fill out a health questionnaire as well. Again, that's just, you know, do you have any symptoms? Have you traveled? That type of thing. Ensure that the users sanitize the equipment after use and provide the necessary cleaning tools to enable them to do that. And again, if you don't have a building platform, then leave those sheets at the amenity entrances to allow for contact tracing purposes. And then remove equipment that can't be easily cleaned, such as yoga mats or balls or that type of thing. People can bring their own in that circumstance. So this is what I'm talking about breaking things down into zones. This is one of our larger communities where there are 400 units. So in the far left picture, they've taken out one of the pieces of equipment. And in the middle picture there, they've actually shrink wrapped the two middle pieces so that people are only allowed to use the two pieces on the end. The far right picture, you'll see an X on the floor that basically says, don't walk here, don't travel between these two zones by this piece of floor. Far left, they're going to have the weight racks there. Some communities have actually been removing the weights, again, just because they're not sure how effective disinfecting would be. There's lots of nooks and crannies in those little areas. Zone 5 here. As you can see, these zones have actually been, we've been laying out different color tape on the floor, numbering the zones. So very important that it's very obvious to people where they should be. In these buildings where we have building link, condo control central, it's actually very easy. What we've done is we've added zones to the software. So people go in, they will choose to book a treadmill in zone 5 from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. And it's managed that way. In a smaller community where you don't have that luxury, you're going to have to use your concierge or perhaps yourself if you're in a building where you don't even have the luxury of the concierge. In larger communities such as this, where there's 400 units, you're also going to have to limit the number of bookings that you allow from one unit over, the course of the day. Most of our communities have not reopened their amenities 24/7. What they're doing is generally, what I'm seeing a lot of is like 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. or 7 a.m. to midnight, and people are actually staggering the cleaning hours. They're hiring extra cleaners, or staggering the hours of the current cleaning staff that they have to try to keep the amenities open as long as possible, but as safely as possible as well. Okay, again, just more pictures of what's happening there. Another one of our larger communities, there's 800 units in this building. So again, they've broken these up into a number of different zones. They're booking them through their building platform. And in this gym, they have the luxury of having 6 different areas. So we figure we can probably safely get about 12 people in this area at a time, which is great considering the number of units and the amount of people that are going to be wanting to use these. I think the biggest thing we're going to have to deal with right now is the fact that people have been locked out of their amenities for 4 or 5 months at this point, and they're getting very anxious to get back into their gyms. So in terms of a pool, you're going to have to determine how many users can safely occupy the space. Again, book through your online platform or through your concierge. Book in 1-hour increments, 45 minutes to allow people to use the pool, and then 15 minutes to wipe down any hard surfaces that they've touched, such as pool stairs or that type of thing, and to be able to get out of the area before the next group comes in. You're going to keep your change rooms and showers closed and ask that residents bathe before they come down to use the amenity. Issue fobs again through the concierge. And if you want to have the furniture remain on the deck, you must insist that people bring towels down and cover anything that they're going to be sitting on. Steam rooms and saunas are to remain closed. Okay, so as a general comment, you may want to engage more security, more cleaning staff. We all know that people don't behave the best at the best of times. So what you really don't want happening is someone getting into an argument, a heated argument with someone over their treadmill use. Get off the treadmill. You should have been gone 15 minutes ago. So I think engaging more security staff to take care of those issues may be prudent. I did notice some general questions about party rooms and lounges and things like that. They're actually a little easier to deal with. A party room is going to be much easier to open than a gym. You're not having multiple units use it at the same time. You're only going to have 1 booking per day. You're going to obviously have the limits engaged as to whatever the bylaw says at the current time. You may want to space out, have a party booked on a Friday and not use the room again until Sunday to allow for thorough cleaning. But again, those areas are much easier to open than things like your pool and your gym. And that's it for me. So I will hand things over to Fred now to take it away.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Carolyn. I really appreciate the way you highlighted the many specific issues, concerns, and protocols regarding the opening of the amenity areas. But my role today is not to discuss the morality, the practicality, or the legalities of opening up the amenity areas, but rather to inform you on how to clean and maintain these spaces effectively once that decision has been made. As you know, there are many challenges in presenting a healthy, safe amenity room environment for your residents. I'll address some of these issues today with simple, safe solutions. However, to get to the solution, we must understand the problem. Bacteria and viruses are both made up of microorganisms called microbes. Viruses are a type of microorganism. They are the smallest of all microbes. Viruses are very diverse, have a variety of shapes and features. Viruses are parasitic. That means they require living cells or tissue in which to grow. Viruses can invade cells of your body using the components of your cell As you see here in the pictures, there's someone sharing his virus with everyone. The other smaller picture, just so for clarify, so you see me properly, I'm the guy there with the shirt on. But viruses basically can invade the cells of your body using the components of your cells to grow and multiply. And some viruses can even kill the host cell as part of their life cycle. The treatment for bacteria and viruses are not only treated different medically, you're aware that antibiotics are very effective fighting bacteria, but are ineffective in treating viruses. So we also must treat differently in our selection of proper cleaning solutions and PPE. Since our primary focus is the effects of the coronavirus, let's discuss what we're protecting our buildings from. Coronavirus, as many know, is transmitted into 3 ways: aerosol, droplets, and contact. The primary proven carriers are contact and droplets. Either way, all the droplets and transference on contact will settle on all surfaces they come in contact with. Data concludes that the coronavirus will live on all surfaces for at least 72 hours and on cloth and fabric for up to a week. The variance depends on temperature, the type of surface, and the humidity of the environment. So over the last 3-4 months, our challenge was really to clean all the common areas. The process is very similar to cleaning amenity areas, but by the nature of the amenity areas where we have gyms, swimming pools, washrooms, saunas, the risk and the need is stronger and even more demanding. Step 1 in every BioClean is to clean and disinfect all areas. In common areas, that would usually include lobbies, elevators, stairwells, doors, frames, handles, security desks, mail rooms, garbage disposal areas, and other high contact areas like tables, handrails, doorknobs, countertops, light switches, faucet handles, and elevator buttons. But in the opening of the amenity areas, the process is similar, but needs to be much more detailed and more intense. You have areas that by the sheer nature of their usage are more high risk: washrooms, gym equipment, sauna, swimming pool area. Because in all these areas, it is normal and common for skin to come in contact with these high touch surfaces. So the first decision we have to make in sanitizing your amenity areas is really what process you're going to use to clean and disinfect the areas for bacteria and viruses. The most common method and the most effective is a chemical process. Health Canada has a list of very specific chemicals it categorizes as virus killers, virucides, I hate saying that word. In today's current time, a chemical that does not kill viruses is not relevant. The virucidal chemical can be applied in several different ways. First, by applying the solution manually. Second, in larger areas, we use an airless sprayer or we can use a fogging machine. The area should be vacant at the time of application, and it usually takes 1 hour before occupancy can resume. Excuse me. However, it is very important. The antivirus effect is only effective on contact and will only last on the surface effectively for a couple of days at best. So a second less proven virucide that people are using is UV lighting, and it's used primarily in hotels, and people are using now in shared areas as a method of sanitizing or preparation for new guest arrivals with hotels. It's a very quick process. It requires very little downtime for rooms. The negatives are as follows. It only kills microbes on contact with no lasting effect on the surface. It is unproven to date as effective with coronavirus. And UV lighting does effectively kill bacteria, but it requires a very strong intensity. And in terms with high intensity that is required, it runs a very strong health risk. And as they pointed out in the recent study in the University of Southern California, and I'll quote, serious and painful eye and skin injuries can result when UV lighting is used improperly. It is an application obviously designed for professionals only. After one has cleaned and eliminated all the bacteria and virus from all the surfaces in your amenity areas, the real challenge is to maintain the state of hygiene. So your first option is to clean and disinfect all the affected areas continually. That is very effective. It's just very time consuming and also very expensive. A second option is after one cleans and disinfects all surfaces, a surface protector can be applied. You know, over the years, they've developed antimicrobial surface protectors. They work simply as follows. After you clean and disinfect all areas, a clear, colorless coating is sprayed onto the surface. The coating contains almost like microscopic swords that will kill the microbes on contact. With regular cleaning, this coating remains active for up to a year. Now, you've probably seen this application when you're watching news clips and you see all those men in the hazmat suits and they're spraying the buses and the streetcars from Singapore all the way to our own TTC. That what they're using is an internationally recognized antimicrobial surface protector called Aegis, and it's manufactured by Microban in North America. It has proven to be effective as an antimicrobial agent for up to a year before reapplication is necessary. As property managers, in addition to providing a clean bio environment on site, you're also responsible for the health and welfare of your staff and your residents. The advocation and the application of acceptable PPE on site is an essential tool in this fight for safety. Allow me to quickly run through some of the basic PPE equipment needed on site and the specifications of that equipment. Number one, hand sanitizers. As to Health Canada specifications, a maximum shelf life of 3 years, alcohol content of 65% or greater. It is recommended that hand sanitizers be made available in the lobby, the parking entrances, and the gym as minimum placements. Masks, either N95, KN95, or cloth mask. As to Health Canada, N95 and KN95 provide a very high level of filtration that is effective and recommended in containing viruses. It is this level of filtration that separates it from other masks. However, always a however, currently due to our countrywide shortages, their use is recommended to be restricted to healthcare workers only. In the event a two-ply cotton surgical mask will offer some protection from viruses. We recommend if N95 if available, or failing that, a two-ply cotton mask for all employees and all visitors to your building. Gloves. One should always wear protective gloves when coming in contact with bacteria, viruses, bodily fluids, fecal matter, and blood. After each usage, gloves must be disposed of in a lined garbage can before disposal. It is recommended that all staff wear gloves. In some of the early openings of Canadian gyms, we're not even going to talk about the American ones, gloves and masks have been made mandatory, as Carol mentioned, to all participants. Another feature for protection are bioshields. These are acrylic barriers that separate areas and thus protect us from the spread of airborne particles. Currently in condominiums, bioshields are most effective in front of the security desk and the manager's desk. However, as gymnasiums open, bioshields are being used in some gyms to separate environments. So for example, cardio equipment will place a full bioshield to protect one person from the gentleman running or the lady running in the machine next to it. But in regards to, gyms and swimming pools and saunas, as we mentioned, the nature of their usage makes them high risk. So if I refer to some of the examples or areas where they have begun to reopen gyms, we see some common safety measures that can be implemented into condominiums. Carolyn has touched on a couple of these. So the first one is reduce capacity. Limit the number of people in the gym and the pool. The second one is reduce duration. Limit the time people are allowed to spend in the gym and the pool. The third one would be mandatory wearing of gloves and masks in the gym. Fourth one would be mandatory wipe down of equipment after use, so where wipes are obviously provided in-house. Fifth one, reservations for gym use. The sixth, installation of BioShield between the running stations. Gym, pool, areas, sauna, mandatory footwear. Temperature health checks prior to entry registration with ID. Change rooms are closed. People can change at home and come down to the gym. And the last one, probably the most important, is ongoing deep cleaning and maintenance. You know, I guess working out isn't so simple anymore. It used to be getting the motivation to go to the gym was the greatest obstacle. But as property managers, although we might not agree with the risk and the safety of opening up amenity areas, once that decision has been made, you have a responsibility to do so in a safe, informed manner. All your staff should be instructed to wear safety gear, glove and mask at all times for their own and for the resident safety. Being geared up at all times, basic hand washing and social distancing should be ingrained in your staff to protect their well-being and the safety of their residents. I also recommend strong caution to many of the outlandish claims or unproved credentials in this newly prominent field of biocleaning. All approved chemicals for this purpose, treating viruses and bacteria, are on Health Canada's website. Health Canada has published a very specific list of specific hard surface cleaners that are likely to be effective for use against COVID-19. Health Canada, I might add, has approved of no product to prevent, treat, or cure COVID-19. When opening your amenity areas, have a cleaning program and a maintenance plan in place prior, not only for the actual opening, but for the time going forward as well. Your obvious goal is to maintain a safe environment for residents, sorry about that, guys, and on-site personnel against challenging circumstances. Like most situations and decisions that we've had over the last several months that have been wrought with uncertainty and changing variables, opening up your amenity areas will not be any different. Have a well thought out plan, execute, and enforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you to all the panelists. A ton of useful and valid information there. Now we're going to open it up to the floor for some Q&A. We have a couple questions. Hold on. All right, the first question is for Louis. Can you please present information on the use of waivers for individuals who wish to use a common area? While they do not eliminate downstream legal action, they can make a user aware of usage rules, risks, etc. Are there sample waiver forms available?
So Carolyn actually posted or presented what a sample waiver looks like. As we both mentioned, the waivers are of limited value in terms of a legal action if some unfortunate situation were to arise, but they do bring value in terms of having something to point to say that an individual was made aware of the risks involved with the activity that they were involved in, and that they nonetheless assumed that risk. So moving away from COVID, a very easy example that people can relate to is if you're skydiving. If you're jumping out of a plane, typically one of those companies will make you sign a liability waiver, but the liability waiver, again, is of limited value. The assumption is that if you are willingly jumping out of a plane, that you understand that there is a risk of something happening with that plane, or when you're trying to land. So the same thing is sort of related with respect to COVID. If you are willingly using an area that is open to other residents, you're pretty much assuming that risk during a global pandemic. The liability waiver will just be useful as an additional measure of saying, on top of all of the notices from the federal government, the provincial government, your municipal government, all of the notices that we've emailed out and posted on the doors or in the gym about the use and wiping down, you went that further step and signed a liability waiver. Ultimately, though, how valuable they are in the long run and the types of situations that might require their use haven't really come up yet. I think most people are exercising common sense and being wary about using high traffic areas. But we do recommend that it is an additional protection tool that is available out there. In terms of precedents or templates, we don't really put one out there, but they're generally not very expensive to draft up for each community. And I'm sure there are many of different types of waivers out there that can be used.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. The next question is for Caroline. Is there any group or association that is gathering statistics concerning the status of condo amenities? Numbers that have reopened, numbers that remain closed, those types of statistics?
No, I don't believe ACMO or the CAO has been gathering statistics such as that. I think a lot of the communities or a lot of the companies rather have been gathering informal statistics. I've checked with my team, and about 7 days ago, roughly 3/4 of them were on their way to reopening these amenities. Some have decided not to reopen pools at all. It just didn't make sense from a financial standpoint. The pools were too small. It would be one user at a time. Bringing back the pool companies to do the chemical checks and all that type of thing just didn't make sense financially. I think most corporations are trying desperately to get their gyms open, but again, it's going to come down to a cost benefit analysis. Some corporations have sent out surveys actually asking their residents what they want to see open and what they're willing to pay extra to open. So I think that's a very valuable tool in your own community to gauge the residents' appetite for paying extra to have these amenities open.
A great answer. And you actually answered one of the other questions that came in, which was should boards be surveying their owners to see what they want and what they're willing to spend. So thank you for answering that as well. The next question is for Fred. Fred, what type of ventilation is recommended for the gyms, or is the distancing of participants sufficient?
In most cases, it has to be sufficient because the costs involved, I would imagine, to increase or change ventilation systems is usually quite exorbitant. Some of the buildings I've been in have, in addition to their normal ventilation, have air cleaners in the gym areas primarily. But basically, physical social distancing is what most buildings and most gyms have been relying on across North America as they reopen up. Dental offices, they have a legal requirement for a certain higher level of filtration, but so far gyms and amenity areas do not.
Okay, great. Next question is for Louis. Our building has implemented a good faith mask policy for all common elements of the building. Small groups of residents would like to get together in an event room for socializing. Chairs would be placed at safe distance, sign-ins required, wiping of surfaces, etc. Can those individuals remove masks when seated? What about those who are unable to comply with a mask requirement? Can they be allowed into the area?
That is a great question, and the truth is it's a multifaceted answer. So, as Carolyn mentioned during her presentation, even in the best of times, outside of a pandemic situation, getting people to comply with rules is somewhat of a challenge. So the same applies with masks. So, first of all, depending on where you are, if you're in Ottawa, Mississauga, Toronto, a good faith mask policy is not quite required because there's already mask requirements from a government level. If you're outside of one of those regions, you know, at the end of the day, it's really people's risk tolerance. Ultimately, people are going to go ahead and do what they want in terms of their level of exposure. Some people are more comfortable with being around larger groups of people or friends. Some are not quite as much. So can those individuals remove masks when seated? Of course they can. Should they? Maybe not. But what we've found, and it's very strange to say from a lawyer standpoint, but a lot of this from a practical enforcement standpoint is quite difficult. I mean, in normal situations, getting people to follow the rules is difficult. And when people are breaking the rules, let's say smoking or noise, it can be challenging to bring them into compliance. Same goes for masks. What we're encouraging is more of that good faith policy that the question asks about, which is, you know, to try to impart on your residents. It's not just about the individual risk. It's also about the potential risk to the rest of your community. You know, you're not putting on a mask just for yourself. You're putting it on for yourself and your neighbors. So trying to get that goodwill from the community will go much further along than taking a hard-nosed approach, trying to make sure that everyone is wearing those masks. Now, with respect to your question about individuals who are unable to comply with a mask requirement, I would suggest that the preference would probably be to ask those people to not go into those common areas themselves, and hopefully they understand. But again, there are some people that have legitimate reasons for not wearing masks, and you know, if an amenity is available to others, so long as the other people in the area are okay with it, then you know, they perhaps should be permitted. But unless you have a security guard posted at every amenity, ensuring that people are following proper protocol, it is quite difficult to enforce. So you really want to, you know, reach people by way of a goodwill and social responsibility perspective, as opposed to a hard-nosed legal one.
Great, thank you for that. Fred, a question came in for you. I'm hoping that you could answer this. We were paying for extra cleaning. I was wondering if we do the fog treatment, can we reduce the cleaner schedule to clean in between of each of these uses? So this way we could reduce the extra cleaning cost.
So the fogging treatment is basically, it produces the same results as an individual cleaner would. However, it covers a larger area in a shorter period of time. It's just a different form of application. So the only cost you probably would be saving would be, to a degree, I assume, labor costs as well. And depending on the areas that you're talking about as well, most of them, if they're large, vast areas, it can be probably done cheaper and more effectively in a fogging method, as opposed to having individual manual labor. I know when we assess jobs and pricing and whatnot, and what's the most conservative way of putting together a project, you know, small detailed work should be done manually, but the larger area definitely should be done with a fogger or an airless sprayer. It's very effective.
Okay, perfect. It is 5 o'clock, so we got time for one or two more questions. Hopefully we could run through them quickly. Next question is for Carolyn. Pretty good question here. Do we need to have the bathroom in the pool open at all for the use of toilets, or can they remain closed?
So most of our communities have, I shouldn't say most, probably half and half have closed their bathrooms and half remained open. And that was at the beginning of the pandemic. I'd say more are going towards having them open. I think you're best to err on the side of, if someone needs to use a bathroom, they're going to, and you'd rather they do that in an area where they're meant to use a bathroom. But again, you're going to have signs posted. You're going to have to put a sanitizing station in the bathroom, ask that they clean down the high touch areas before and after use. So the toilet handle, the faucet. We've been encouraging actually that where people are financially able to do so, to replace their faucets and their toilets with touchless appliances. But again, it's going to come down to an individual decision. In some cases, staff need a bathroom to themselves, just to make sure again that, we're trying to keep them as safe as possible. So if you only have one bathroom on a ground floor level or one bathroom somewhere, you may want to keep it closed for the use of your staff. It'll depend completely on your physical setup.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Louis, you guys touched upon this a little bit. I'm not sure if you touched on this specifically, but do you recommend liability waivers for non-gym amenities such as meeting rooms, party rooms, guest suites, etc.?
So I've had a lot of different clients ask for different types of waivers, but some corporations, what they're doing is they're just getting a general liability waiver for all of the common elements. So saying if you're using any of these listed amenities, like the party room, you've got condos that have games rooms or movie theater rooms and stuff like that, then those liability waivers would apply to all of those amenities. So depending on your community, the types of amenities that you have, you can certainly do a liability waiver for more than one type of amenity. And it might be valuable to actually have it to cover all of those different amenities instead of doing one waiver per amenity.
Okay, wonderful. So it's just past 5 o'clock now. We do need to wrap up. I just want to thank our panelists again, Louis, Fred, and Carolyn. You guys were incredible. Wealth of information. We really do appreciate it. And I know the condo community and the condo industry really appreciates it as well. So thank you guys very, very much for taking the time to educate us. Like we said earlier on, you will be emailed a survey after this. We just want to get some quick feedback from you guys, see how you enjoyed it. And also we're going to gauge some topics for our next webinar. You'll also be sent a recording of the webinar, hopefully within the next week, hopefully by the end of this week, actually. But just keep an eye on your emails. If you're registered for this webinar, if you're on right now especially, you will definitely see a copy come through. And if there's any other questions, any other comments, feel free to direct them to myself or Marco. You could find us at minutesolutions.com, or my email is noah@minutesolutions.com, and Marco's is marco@minutesolutions.com. Thank you all for attending. We really do appreciate it. We appreciate the support. And a big final thank you to our panelists. We hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.